much needed preservation work taking place at Stonehenge to protect one of the mysteries of the ancient world.
The researchers thought they knew Stonehenge. Then they fed it to a machine. For 5,000 years, these stones have held one tidy story about who raised them and why, and we never questioned it.
Stonehenge is unique. It's designed with precision engineered carving, and it really stands out as the kind of symbol of ancient Britain.
So a team did what no one had dared. They handed every scan, every survey, 3 centuries of measurements to an AI and told it to find what all of us had walked straight past. What came back stopped them cold. It was not the answer they went looking for. It was not one anyone was ready to defend. And it does not leave the Stonehenge you were taught standing. The wrong story. Start with the version you grew up with because it is the first thing to wobble. Neolithic farmers, antler picks and rope and muscle, raising a ring of stone on a chalk plain through faith and patience, and a few unhurried centuries. Simple, human, finished. It is a good story. It is also, the closer you look, a story with holes in it you could walk straight through. Here is the ground you are actually standing on. Stonehenge sits on the open chalk of Salisbury Plain, 90 miles southwest of London, and it rises out of flat farmland in a way that has quietly unsettled people for centuries. The outer ring is sarsen. Each of those stones stands more than 20 feet tall and weighs as much as 25 tons, and they were hauled from the Marlborough Downs, roughly 20 miles to the north. Then, they were capped with lintels locked into place with joints a carpenter would recognize, mortise and tenon, tongue and groove, carved into raw rock by people who, by the standard account, had no metal to carve with. Now, step inside that ring, because it gets stranger. The smaller stones there are the blue stones, still up to 4 tons each, and they did not come from anywhere nearby. They came from the Preseli Hills of West Wales, about 140 miles away. No wheels built for that load, no cranes, no iron. Just that distance and 4 tons of rock over and over. And then there is the stone at the dead center. Let me be straight with you about this one, because it is the detail that should stop you. For 100 years, everyone assumed the 6-ton altar stone was Welsh, like its neighbors. In 2024, a chemical fingerprint of its mineral grains matched something nobody was ready for: the old red sandstone of the Orcadian Basin in northeast Scotland. That is a straight-line journey of at least 430 miles, most likely made by sea. It is the longest journey of any stone in any Neolithic monument we know of. And here is the honest part. No one can yet tell you how they did it, or why they needed that exact stone from that exact place. Sit with that distance, because modern crews with hydraulic gear still sweat over a single 25-ton block. The textbook answer, rollers, rope, ramps, generations of patient labor, carries the story while straining under its own weight. Nobody disputes the stones arrived. They are right there. The question the machine kept circling back to was never really how they were moved. It was why these particular stones, from these particular places, were worth the moving at all. And to get anywhere near that, you first have to understand why we handed the whole problem to a machine in the first place. The machine looks. Here is the thing nobody tells you about Stonehenge. It is not understudied. It is drowning in study. 300 years of surveys and scans and measurements, every generation measuring the place with the tools of its day and arguing with the generation before. No single person alive can hold all of it in their head at once. The pile is simply too deep. And remember what you are asking it to read. Not one generation's project, but a monument raised in phases across roughly 1,000 years, from about 3,000 to 2,000 years before the Common Era. That is the kind of problem you build a machine for. You feed a pattern finder every measurement at once, not one fragment at a time, the way a human is forced to, and ask it to surface the correlations nobody could see, because nobody could ever look at everything at once. Let me not oversell this, because it matters that I am straight with you. The AI is not an oracle. It did not hand down commandments. It is a pattern finder. And what it flagged are patterns. Some of them genuinely unsettling, none of them proven. But the first surprise was simply where it chose to look. Any person walking up. To these stones goes straight for the stones. The machine did not. It went for something almost everyone walks past without a second glance. A feature written off for 300 years as background noise. If you want to understand why that one choice quietly reframes everything that comes after, subscribe now, because this is where the familiar story starts to come apart in your hands. Here is what it found. 56 pits. Just inside the outer earthwork sits a ring of 56 pits. They were first noted back in the 17th century and named the Aubrey Holes, and for most of the time since, they have been treated as scenery. A few of them held cremated remains, others sat empty. The spacing between them got written off as the ordinary sloppiness of people working with antler picks and no rulers. The machine did not treat them as scenery, it treated them as a signal, and it dragged a very old question back to the surface. Why 56? Why that exact number, laid out with that much care, when a ring of stones does not need 56 of anything? I have to be honest, the answer is a hedge, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. The lunar connection is not new, and it is not settled. It is a hypothesis, offered as a hypothesis that people have argued over for more than 60 years. It runs like this. The moon's rising and setting points drift between their extremes over a cycle of about 18.5 years. Multiply that cycle by 3, and you land remarkably close to 56. So, one reading, and it is only a reading, makes that ring a slow counting device, a way to hold decades of moonrise in the ground and pass the count forward to people not yet born. Whether the builders meant any of that, we cannot prove, but sit with what the claim actually requires. Tracking the moon's extremes is not a matter of glancing up on a clear night. It means watching the same points on the horizon across nearly 2 decades, holding every earlier mark against tonight's sky. Patient enough to catch a drift, most people would never notice. If that ring really is a counter, it is the finished product of a project that started in someone's memory a full generation before the first pit was ever cut. And once it is cut, here is the part that gets me. It never stops running. The moon does not need to be watched. The people who built it do not need to be alive. The count just sits there in the spacing, still correct, still waiting. And a ring of pits that might quietly be a lunar counter is the gentlest thing this machine found here. What it surfaced in the stones themselves is stranger, and a great deal harder to shrug off. Sound in stone. When the analysis turned from the holes to the standing stones, it went looking at something you would never think to check. Not how the monument looks, how it sounds. And this part is not speculation. This part is measured. Acoustic scientists built a full 1:12 scale model of a complete Stonehenge, every stone in place, and put real sound through it in a lab. What they found is genuinely strange. A closed ring of tall, dense, hard stone reflects sound back on itself. Inside the intact monument, speech was amplified by about 4 decibels, and the whole space held a reverberation you simply do not get standing out in an open field. Here is the detail that gets under my skin. That effect only worked for the people inside the ring. The sound stayed in. It did not carry out to whoever stood beyond the stones. Think about what that does to a gathering. Stay with me here. Whatever happened inside that circle happened inside an acoustic bubble no open field could reproduce. Voices louder, fuller, folded back on themselves, while the people outside heard almost nothing of it. And the tell that it was not an accident is repetition. A single odd echo is a fluke of one day. A property that shows up every single time you complete the ring is a property somebody chose to keep. Then there are the blue stones. I have to be careful here, so let me flag the line clearly. Some of the rock in the Preseli Hills, the exact region those stones came from, genuinely rings, strike certain slabs, and they give off a clear, sustained bell-like tone instead of a dull thud. Researchers have documented these ringing rocks in the very landscape the blue stones were quarried from. That much is real. What I will not sell you is the tidy claim that every stone was hand-picked by ear to build a precise musical scale. That goes past the evidence, and you deserve to know where the evidence stops. But the quieter version is unsettling enough on its own. If some of the chosen stones were known to ring, then sound may have been part of why they were worth dragging 140 miles. Not just their color, not just their source. A stone that sings is not an ordinary stone. It is not hard to imagine why you would want it at the heart of something. Put the two together, and a picture forms that needs no mysticism to raise the hair on your arms. A ring engineered to hold and shape sound, filled with stones, some of which may themselves have rung. To the people standing inside it, this would not have registered as architecture. It would have felt alive. And once you see that the stones were chosen this carefully, you have to widen the frame, because the machine did. And what it saw around the monument changes the scale of the whole thing. The wider plan. Here is where it stops being about a ring of stones at all. Stonehenge does not stand alone, and it never did. Sit with this. It is the centerpiece of one of the densest ceremonial landscapes in Europe, and none of that is speculation. Within a few miles lie Durrington Walls, a vast settlement in Henge where many of the builders likely actually lived. There is Woodhenge, a timber twin. There is the Cursus, a pair of parallel earthworks running for nearly 2 miles across the plain. There is the Avenue, a ceremonial approach linking the stones to the river. And there are hundreds of burial mounds, generation after generation of the dead, laid down in sight of the circle. Durrington Walls alone rewrites the picture. Digs there have turned up evidence of enormous gatherings and feasting on a scale that means people traveled long distances to take part, some bringing animals raised hundreds of miles away. Let me be straight. This was not some lonely shrine tended by a handful of locals. It was a destination, a place a scattered population organized itself around and returned to across centuries. Feed the survey and LiDAR data for that whole landscape into one system, and the individual sites stop reading as scattered dots. They read as a connected whole, built and rebuilt over many centuries, with Stonehenge as one anchor among several, and some of those surrounding earthworks are older than the Great Stone Ring itself, which means the sacred landscape came first, and the monument you picture was set down into ground that already carried meaning. Now, the tempting leap is to say they surveyed all this to a precision we only associate with far later civilizations, holding perfect geometry across miles of open country. I am not going to make that leap for you. The evidence does not carry it, and I would rather lose the drama than lie to you. What the record does support is remarkable enough on its own. This was a coordinated landscape, shaped with intention across a span of time so long that no one who started it lived to see it finished. And that raises the question the machine could not stop returning to. What is worth that kind of patience? What were they watching for? Because it turns out the whole thing points at the sky. What it tracks. The solstice alignment is the one you already know, and it is real, and it is undisputed. Stonehenge frames the midsummer sunrise and the midwinter sunset along its main axis. The builders were watching the sun, and they built to catch it. The moon is the harder question, and here is where it stopped being a debate you could have from an armchair. Across 2024 and 2025, a team drawn from English Heritage and the universities of Oxford, Leicester, and Bournemouth ran a dedicated study of a rare event called the Major Lunar Standstill. That is the moment in that 18.5-year cycle when the moon swings out to its most extreme rising and setting positions. Their focus was the 4 station stones, which appear to line up with those lunar extremes. Fabio Silva of Bournemouth University went to the stones for it, and not just once. Through 2024, he was there at odd hours, in the dark and the cold, watching the moon come up crescent and then full against those station stones, checking with his own eyes where it landed. There is something about that image that stays with me. A researcher alone in the dark at the oldest riddle in Britain, waiting on the moon, to tell him whether 5,000 years of people had been watching what he was watching. And the team has been careful, genuinely careful, not to overclaim what they saw. Clive Ruggles of the University of Leicester has circled this question for years, and he will not tell you the alignment was deliberate, not for certain. But there is one detail he keeps coming back to. The cremated dead at Stonehenge are not scattered evenly around the site. They cluster toward the southeast, the same direction as the southernmost moonrise. He offers it as a possibility, nothing harder, that this lunar direction may have been treated as sacred and the dead placed to face it. But once you have heard it, it is very hard to unhear. So here is the honest tally, straight. 1 confirmed solar alignment, 1 seriously investigated, still open lunar one, and a monument that seems, across its entire design, to have been built to watch cycles that turn slower than a single human life. What runs on a clock that long? What is worth carving into stone so the watching outlasts everyone who began it? The data can raise that question. It cannot close it. And the way this place finally went silent only makes the question louder. The quiet close. One last thing to sit with, and I have to be honest about what it is. This part is interpretation, not fact. Take it as the story the evidence invites, not one it forces on you. Stonehenge did not get abandoned in a panic. Over centuries, the active use of it simply wound down. And when researchers look at how that ending unfolded, it does not read like people fleeing a disaster. It reads like a long, slow letting go of a place that had mattered for the better part of 2,000 years. You can build a reading around that, and it is a haunting one. As long as you hold it loosely, which is exactly what I am asking you to do. Picture the last generations who still gathered here, carrying a purpose their ancestors set in motion, 20 and more generations back, working towards something none of them personally began and none of them would ever see completed. It is an act of faith stretched across an almost unimaginable span of time, kept alive by people who inherited a half-finished intention and chose, quietly, to keep going. And here is where it closes the loop with where we started. We are the strangers on the far side of all that time. 5,000 years after the first ditch was cut, we are the ones finally standing over the whole record at once, laying every measurement side by side to read the design as one thing. The tool doing the reading is new. The questions it surfaces are not. The same ones people have circled since the first medieval writer looked up at these stones and reached for giants. Because what the machine keeps pointing at is not a beginning. It looks more like the opposite. Knowledge already old, already refined, carved into the most durable thing available because nothing softer would survive to carry it forward. The astronomy is there, the engineering is there, the intention is there, measured and mapped. The one thing missing is where all of it came from, and what long age of learning and forgetting sits behind the people who raised these stones. And here is the part that should stay with you tonight. Stonehenge is not the only ancient site now being read this way, with the same tools and the same patient, all-at-once attention. The moment this exact pattern turns up somewhere else, the comfortable version of the story gets a great deal harder to hold on to. Subscribe so you are here when the next site goes under the lens. And tell me in the comments, which ancient place do you think should be fed into the system next, and why that one?